Welcome to another episode of Future of Cloud Optimization. Today I have Dany Daya with me. He is the director, leader at HC leading cloud strategy and FinOps. Welcome, Dany, to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Let's get started. So first off, can you share your journey into FinOps, right? Let's say at the company, how did you transform from migration from on-prem to public, like building a FinOps team and a culture?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So it all started, I would say, in 2018. Basically, Etsy took a strategic decision to migrate from on-prem to the cloud. And I joined Etsy shortly after they migrated the first stack of webs to the cloud. And pretty clearly, and early on, it was obvious that we needed to pay attention to the cost. We started going through all of the challenges of spend is not, or the actuals are not trending where the estimates are, and started having all of those unknown unknowns. So pretty early on, we realized that we need to pay more attention there. And I would say since then, my role back then as an IC started shifting to be focused mainly on the financials of the cloud. And with time, I started expanding, building a team, and we got through a couple of iterations of renaming, rebranding, and now we are using cloud strategy and FinOps.
And during this migration, unpredictability is probably a huge problem for most companies, right? So when I was in my previous company, we decided to migrate somewhere, and yes, we got some bills that were not expected. We started thinking about our migration journey itself. So how would you tackle that?
I think this is part of the challenges, yet the beauty of the cloud, in my perspective. Like, you need to be comfortable with the unknown. And to get there, you need to get into the mindset of the different stakeholders, whether it's finance or engineering. Like, many of those people, when they are doing a migration for the first time from on-prem to the cloud, or companies, like, there is a cultural aspect that is going to change. Like, from a finance perspective, you really need to be comfortable with the fact that this is no longer a predictable cost. This is very elastic, and it can change either way. And you need to build a financial model that allow for that unpredictability, whether it's up or down. On the other side, for engineers as well, there is the notion that you are having now, quote unquote, unlimited resources. So you need to be mindful about the code that you are pushing and making sure it's using reasonable amount of resources. So to me, this is probably the biggest thing, is to make sure that the mindset, the culture is aligned with developing and engineering on the cloud. And basically, this was the first step in kind of dealing with unpredictability, is having that kind of alignment from different stakeholders of what are we dealing with and how should we think about it. And everything else, like, it's kind of like a waterfall journey from the moment we established that.
The engineering rules, were these enforced or were these just visibility to them?
At Etsy, we have a pretty healthy culture, and in some aspects we had to enforce budgets or enforce caps, but they were very, very, very limited. What we tried to do instead is, as you mentioned, like, the moment you start providing engineers with visibility into what's going on, you are likely to see course corrections immediately happening. So the foundation block to me is like providing this visibility. And I can see some companies doing it like a police model, that you must do this and that. We didn't do that at Etsy. We kind of like, we trust our engineering culture, we trust our engineers. And it was like just showing them the amount of resources they are using was sufficient to kind of drive action to change things. And later on, and I think we're going to be talking about this later on, we kind of like started moving into incorporating these aspects of cloud financials into the product design journey. But on the engineering side, at the very beginning, visibility was the key point. The other thing that I want to also call out here is how do you communicate with engineers? Like, yes, there are some, whenever you start reaching the level of director, VP, CTO, cost becomes a thing that they are accountable for. But when you're talking with engineers on the ground, engineers really don't really understand necessarily the notion of cost. And the reality is, in the FinOps space, cost is not a problem. Cost is a symptom of a problem. And the problem or the product, not necessarily a problem, it's like a design issue, architectural issue, utilization issue. So what we try to do over time is really expose these metrics about your utilization, how much you are using, to the engineers that are running the jobs, because they could much easier relate to that rather than giving them a dollar value that, like, what does that even mean to me?
So when you expose that report, is it the usage and also recommendations or just the usage?
It really depends. I think about this in two scenarios. Like sometimes you know what the recommendation is. Like, for example, if you're talking about CPU utilization, you know, for example, that your CPU utilization should be in a specific range. You don't want to be too low because you are wasting resources. You don't want to be too hot because you are probably getting into performance issues. So in some situations, we could show like what is the guidance that we need to be in. In other situations, we don't know what the guidance is. And this is where we kind of like seek a conversation into like, let us have a conversation about what's going on here to try to figure out like this new usage or this unexpected usage, what is the value that it's driving? Is it configured in the correct way? And the reality, the answers could lead to different outcomes depending on the nature of the issue we are talking about.
Now, from recommendation to action. So how was that? How difficult was that?
Yeah, it really depends on what is the action. Like there are some actions that are pretty much config change and ensuring that monitoring that we are not breaking anything. Those are kind of like we executed on them pretty easily. Now, there are areas where, and again, this is where you don't know exactly what you are dealing with. Like, for example, you needed to run cleanups, you needed to run more like re-architecture or redesigning or funding a squad. So it really depends on what is the action and really setting expectations. Like, it's unfair to kind of like expect an engineering team to kind of change a config in the same time that it's going to take them to redesign or re-architect a system. So this is where it comes back to the first point that we start talking about, like education and aligning expectations. We need to be transparent with engineers about what's happening and also take this to the finance slash business counterpart so that they are aware of what's happening. So to kind of like going back to your question, some actions were very easy to take. Others took a bit of time and the preparation. But the key was let us over communicate this so that everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, and these actions are solely taken by the engineering team or some are taken by the FinOps teams as well, or is it 100% on the other?
Let's see. So at least at Etsy, we don't push code. Like FinOps at Etsy, we don't push code. However, there are other ways to reduce cost other than optimization. Like if you think about it like cuts, for example, purchasing reserved instances, for example, like these are situations that don't necessarily require engineers to do the work. These are owned by FinOps at Etsy. And there are other areas like, for example, renegotiating contracts, stuff like that, that we also own. But in terms of pushing code, this is primarily done by engineering. A lot of time we provide the recommendation to them, but the actual work, engineering work done by engineers, we do some of the commercial stuff when applicable.
When it comes to risks associated with optimization, so sometimes it could deteriorate performance a little bit, right? How do you handle that?
Again, this goes back to our engineering cultures. We are great at measuring our engineering performance. So whenever there is a change that we are pushing, we will have many measures that we keep an eye on and monitoring tools we leverage to ensure that any change we are doing, we are not impacting the performance. At the end of the day, like having a positive customer experience is one of the most important things for us. So we don't want to impact that. So we kind of like, maybe latency is a big topic we always talk about. We kind of like measure what is the latency observed at the end user. And we continuously do research to validate what are the threshold that this becomes an issue for users. So what we try to do is keep monitoring, ensuring that the latency or other metrics are within the thresholds that we are comfortable with. So this is one of the biggest risks, in my opinion. And another risk is really if you go into, and again, you hear me going back to this concept of value, value, value. If you go too much onto the optimization side, like you don't want your engineering, at least at a company like Etsy, which we are like, we develop tons of product on our platform. We don't want to spend our engineering force to just be optimizing to reduce cost. We want them to build features to improve the customer experience, to grow the business. So it's really like, how can we balance this margin between healthy optimizations and not overdoing it, but also not underdoing it?
Coming to sustainability, how dialed in are you on a sustainability along with this optimization?
Yes. So sustainability, it's a very, very close topic to be. In fact, this is what I was talking about in Barcelona in FinOps Europe, which is how did we build the sustainability aspect at Etsy, especially when we migrated from prem to the cloud. So I don't actually remember why I personally became involved in it. I think it was like personal passion from the get-go. I've been very close to sustainability topic, environmental topic. So I kind of like pitched myself into this working group that was called Sustainable Compute at Etsy. It included a couple of engineers, one person from analytics, and some people from our kind of like centralized impact team. And this is how we started looking at it. It's like we started figuring out how can we estimate or guesstimate or have a sense of our usage in the cloud. We were on the prem. We used to receive like energy report showing us how much kilowatt hours we were spending. And again, this is in 2016, 2017. So everything was about energy. Carbon wasn't a major topic. We went to the cloud and we have no visibility into that. So we all see like line items in our bill, in our cloud exports that show what we are using in terms of resources, but we didn't have any idea of what is the energy usage of these resources that we are using. And this is where we kind of like in our work group, we kind of had some people working on doing market research to understand the usage of these resources in terms of energy. And mainly from the FinOps side, what we were trying to do is providing as much insight as possible about what are these resources in the sense of what are they doing and how they are working, because sometimes you need that kind of knowledge to complement the data that you are getting from your research. So it was really a joint effort at the beginning. Now, if you think about another major synergy between sustainability and optimizations, is really like the essence of both is reducing. So when you are reducing the usage of resources, you are very likely to be saving cost, reducing cost, and also you are very likely to be saving your impact on the environment. So for us, like post migration, we went through a few years of fine tuning, optimization, re-architecting to be more optimized. And all of that has led to substantial reduction in resources, which ended up leading to helping us reach our sustainability or impact goals. So they are very related. And in fact, this is one of the things in FinOps X that was being talked about extensively is how the whole concept of sustainability is becoming an extension, and hopefully more in the future, it's going to become part of the core of the FinOps frameworks and practices.
Now that you're here in this FinOps maturity journey, and I know there are a lot of companies who would want to take this journey now, right? So they don't know the first steps, they don't know what to expect. So what would be your few suggestions when somebody's trying to start this journey?
So first thing is it's not simple, is setting expectations. Like it's not easy to go to your financial counterpart, whether it's a VP, whether it's a CFO, and tell them, hey, we are X% higher than what we told you. But the sooner this conversation happens, the better. So really being as transparent as possible. And the other thing I would say is be okay with the unknown. You're not going to get it perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So these are the two things that come to my mind. And again, the rest are around observability, cost tracking, following best practices. But to me, the biggest two things are like really communications and being comfortable with the unknown. The one thing I would also add is keep in mind, at least this is my personal opinion, I'm a strong believer in it, which is like keep in mind that cost is not the problem itself. It's likely that there is underlying issue that is causing the cost to spike, and we are just seeing the cost. But if you go into the engineering stack, you are likely to see some metric that are leading to that higher cost. So really, the sooner you can expose these metric to engineers, the higher likelihood that you're going to be able to drive action and adoption.
Would you give me a sample metric that you would probably look for when they see such a thing?
We touched briefly on it, but like CPU utilization. CPU, like it's one thing to go to an engineer showing them, hey, that your CPU utilization has, like usually it has been trending around 50%. It dropped all of a sudden on, I don't know, like on November 15th to 20%. So what happened here? Because that's likely gonna imply, assuming that your usage also increased, so that's gonna lead to new cost. And exposing that metrics to the engineers with the date it happened, it might give them much more like it will make their life easier in debugging and understand what's happening. And again, like the faster you are in this feedback loop, the better you are. Like it's always very annoying to engineers to get back to them or to anyone like, hey, what did you do 2 months ago that led to this? If you get it to me like in a day, I'm likely to understand exactly what I did. But 2 months ago, I don't know if I recall.
Yeah, maybe as you mentioned earlier, maybe pairing it with that, the latency metric would probably give a clear visibility on you are absolutely not using these resources, correct?
Exactly. And again, like these are a couple of metrics only. There could be tons of others. Another one is like, and again, we've done tons of work that took months to see that the results of it is around like storage. Like a lot of the storage mediums we use offer like some sort of time to live TTL, which is basically if something not accessed after X days, you can delete it. One way of having a meaningful conversation with engineers is like likelihood is like showing them what's the TTL as well as the last access log. So if you see a huge gap there, it means that you are keeping the resources higher than you actually need. So cost itself, cost metrics might not imply much. However, if you look at it from under the hood, what is really happening is like you are storing more than you need and you are showing them the proof that this is your TTL, this is your last access log. Why are we keeping this for these extra number of days? So this is the type of conversation I would encourage people to start having on the engineering side because it will make adoption much easier.
So does at scale, I mean, it's Definitely at scale, right? So at scale problems versus a startup problem, right? Is there anything that one should be like watching out for, especially when you are establishing it up at scale?
Establish margin of errors. Companies that have big spend, they can tolerate bigger dollar value. Like, for example, if the budget is 100 million a year, if you end up spending 102, like 2 extra million, that is 2% extra. That might not be a big number if you look at it from a percent point of view. So, like, establish a margin of error that finance or the business is comfortable with, say at 2%, 5%, and give that kind of headroom to your engineers so that they don't, not all spikes are will put you in the red zone. So establish that margin of error so it gives you some freedom, some headroom that will make it much easier to govern and will give you also some indication where you're heading.
The bright side of things, right? Once it's optimized, right? Getting optimization is one thing, staying optimized is another thing, right? So what are your tips there?
Again, like this is where like I believe FinOps is like it's a journey because the reality is we are always building new stuff. You are always trying new things. Like for example, now everyone is talking about Gen AI. Our legacy systems are optimized, but when we are trying Gen AI, it's naturally not going to be optimized. So it's really sticking to the same kind of like framework or run book, which is like have visibility, have this mindset, have some guidance, and really, really have conversations around what is the value, focus on the value, not on the dollar amount. So it's really kind of like reiterating the framework. Also, on the legacy systems, I think automation is great there. Like one example we were talking about is CPU utilization, for example. A way to automate that to remain within a specific range is like to use autoscaler. And auto scaling is a great feature where it can allow you to scale up your resources when you need more and give them away when you don't need them. So sometimes leveraging automation will help you remain optimized. Another example for that would be like, again, the example that I gave you around this metric around TTL versus access log. This could be easily, or we have automated this. Like we send alerts to folks whenever the delta between those two metrics in their specific directory is bigger than X. So it's kind of like automation helps the systems remains optimized, and we are less and less relying on people to remember to do X and Z, and we ask the automation to do it.
So Danny, yeah, I think this is probably the best way to get to the next question, right? AI and FinOps. Could be Gen AI, could be AI, pure AI. How do you see that?
Well, two things. At a high level, I think Gen AI can be a great tool in boosting efficiency of employees. Think about simple stuff from writing an email to summarizing a document to drafting a proposal. Like Gen AI can help tons in our day-to-day activities, professional day-to-day activities. So there is definitely tons of efficiency that could be extracted from Gen AI. Now, when it comes to AI and Gen AI, well, first of all, I wish those were available for Etsy probably like 6 or 7 years ago because it would have saved us tons of time. But really, like Gen AI or automation in general, AI can help you with a lot of alerting, can help you like analyze the trends much faster. So these are the things that I think Gen AI can help or AI can help like people that are newer in this journey is like rather than having to worry about building all internal toolings and monitoring to tell you when you have the opportunity to optimize. Gen AI is a great tool to showing these, to surfacing these for you. So to me, it's like get it and become part of our day-to-day activities. I think an interesting topic, though, is really FinOps for Gen AI. Because as many people start, many companies start using Gen AI, here you go. You have a potentially
Exactly.
black box that could explode your cost without knowing exactly what's happening. So, how can we work with all engineering teams that are leveraging LLMs and Gen AI to understand what they are trying to do and also have some guardrails around their usage without having very tight guardrails because that will limit innovation? So I think that's going to be, and this is an interesting conversation we have been having over the last year or so at Etsy. I think it's really interesting and it's going to help us evolve our practices to adopt or to accommodate this new technology.
Now, without outside of Gen AI, what are your other bold predictions of future of cloud optimization? What's going to happen?
I would love, I don't know if I would predict that, but I would love for all cloud providers to improve the toolings they have in their stacks. Like, let me give you an example. We've talked earlier about storage. Like, to me, one of the huge potentials that all companies have is reducing their storage cost because I don't think people know how much they are storing, where they are storing, what they are storing. So really, it's like solving for that is going to be a huge win for a lot of companies. Another one to me, it's going to be around like a situation where your cloud usage is very elastic as a result of your business side. So kind of how can we get those two sides of the practice, like the business side that's estimating the revenue, the traffic, all of these stuff, much closer and much coherent and kind of like interlocks perfectly with FinOps. I think this is going to be another area because, again, like the way I view it is that FinOps is there not only to reduce cost, but to drive value. So the more you get those pieces closer to each other, the better. Again, most of these are more wishes than predictions, I would say.
Makes total sense. Generally, for you, when you measure KPIs for your success, right? FinOps team success, what are the key KPIs outside of cost that you measure?
I mean, I think it's probably cost is the major one. It's like cost within the margin of error. And I think another one that I don't think we have came up with a KPI around it, but how engineers see us as partners. Like, do they like working with us? Do they not
Yeah.
like working with us? Because again, in a culture like Etsy, it's really critical to approach this topic from a partnership perspective. It's really going to be hard to enforce it on people. So I know we don't have like an official KPI for it, but like, what is the overall sentiment about FinOps team within Etsy from engineers or other partners, whether it's legal or finance, etc.? We don't have a KPI for that, but I would love to have one. I'm going to ask you this question. What are some KPIs that are out there? Maybe we can benefit from that.
Yeah. So one KPI that I personally measure is the amount of engineering time spent on this. Right. So I do not want engineers to spend time on cost optimization. I somehow believe that at scale, you have to run your applications with zero rules. And these rules have to be learned by a machine learning model. Because you've created your application is going to behave multiple different ways with multiple different users. So you have to have someone who's watching the application and says, you're running a job, coding is done, creation is over. Now let me manage it. Right? That's how I look at generally things. So the number of meetings between FinOps and Eng, in my mind, should be really on the internet topics. Right? What kind of comments do you want? What kind of project roadmap that you have? If you meet with them on cleanup or on sizing, that's where I generally tell my teams, yeah, looks like we have some work to do.
I see. I see. So basically, you're kind of like you are empowering a culture of FinOps across the organization.
Exactly.
It's absolutely the way to go. Like at Etsy, we use this like notion of centralized optimization, which are driven by the FinOps team, and decentralized or local optimization that are like, see something, do something. So someone like running their application, they see an area to do things better or faster or more efficient, boom, they do it by themselves. And this is when it's kind of bittersweet because it doesn't give you too much visibility from a financial perspective into what's about to happen because you don't know exactly what are these pockets, but also it's very good because it means that your organization it's becoming at a steady state where you don't need to nudge people to do these stuff. I like
Exactly. And I'll give you one more example. I'm so passionate about this topic. That's why. So the largest cybersecurity company in the world is using us, right? So our platform. And what we have seen is the developers do not even know now how to configure a Kubernetes cluster. They said, you know what, I don't even know how to do it. Just there is another system that's doing it. So I'm writing my code. Don't bother me with anything else, right? So that's us. So that system learns and does it. Now, Danny, another question, right? On Etsy, I know that we have made significant progress. Are there any achievements that you're extremely proud of that you want to share?
the biggest one to me, and again, you could infer from our earlier conversation, is really the work we have done with storage. This was pretty much like a FinOps observed, a FinOps advocated for staffing of a small team, engineering team to do the work, and we hired amazing individuals, amazing engineering manager, but it's probably the biggest one, both in terms of cost savings as well as it kind of like pushed us out of the typical FinOps practice into becoming a real partner within the engineering organization.
That's a significant. I've seen many companies struggling with that side, that aspect, right? So if you, yeah, that's awesome. Now, if there was a Cloud Olympics, right? What event would you dominate?
What events are there in Cloud Olympics?
Okay, let's start with the first one. Architecture is one aspect, right? The second would be, yeah, let's say deployment. The third would be platform as a service. The fourth would be, I know you're going to dominate this, but FinOps, right? And making sure that, yes, you have the right best practices. The fourth would be really customer experience.
I think it's customer. I would, if I'm to pick one, I would say it's customer experience. And the reason why I say that because it's like I view FinOps as an art more than as a science. It's like how can you communicate? How can you? Of course, you're going to be relying on tons of data, but really, how can you communicate this data? How can you make people, as we were speaking earlier, comfortable with the unknown? So to me, I find those to be closest to the customer service. And I think this is what FinOps is about. It's really like this glue or bridge between different sides or different parties within an organization. And FinOps help bring all of those together. So I would think this one. The other one that you didn't mention it, which I don't know if it's like a widely thought of part of the engineering world or the cloud world, is really vendor management and negotiations. Like at the end of the day, when you are a big company hosted on a cloud provider, they are really your backbone. So you need to have a great relationship with them. And the great relationship sometimes imply that you are negotiating too hard, sometimes imply that you are giving some stuff. So it's really this aspect of vendor management, which is something, again, we've done at Etsy. We brought it into FinOps, which is not very common in the industry, but it worked perfectly for us. So bringing those together, I think if that's part of the Olympics, I would love to be part of that game.
Perfect. Again, I think you picked the two challenging, hard, extremely hard, complex areas. Kudos to that. It was super amazing having you on this call. And I think most of the achievements that you had in your journey are not just amazing, they are thought provoking too, right? So there are things that you could do to simplify some of those tasks ahead of you and start the journey too. So I appreciate your time here. Thank you so much, Danny.
Well, that has But my pleasure as well. It's a very interesting conversation. I really loved your KPI about reducing engineering hours. Yeah, that was super, super useful. Thanks for having me.